Yeah, good morning. My name's Eric Fisher. I am the biology manager for this department here called GBR Biology. That's the biology department for the travel adventure tourism company Experience Co. Quite a large company, runs 5 reef tourism products in the Cairns Port Douglas region, which visits various islands, sites, patch reefs, ribbon reefs, overall 50 reef sites. So we spend a lot of time on the reef. I've been working in reef tourism for around about 15 years. When it comes to fish, I've been invited today from citizens of the Great Barrier Reef, good friends of mine. So the first question I have today is from Kate. Hi Eric, what is your favourite fish species on the reef and why? I'm also going to mention the last question here too from Paul, which is, hi Eric, you mentioned you are fascinated by the way that coral reef fish live their lives. Can you share some of the interesting behaviours? They are totally fascinating. The largest group of vertebrates on the planet. You know, you're talking probably a couple of thousand coral reef fish species. There is a bit of argument on what we call a coral reef fish, so the definition. Some people might say that a coral reef fish is basically a fish that spends its whole life in a coral reef habitat. Or some people might say that a coral reef fish is also a fish that might have maybe one aspect of their life is spent in that coral reef habitat. Either way you look at it, there is a lot of fish species and it's hard to pick one. And I've been doing interpretation pretty solidly for 15 years, and I get asked this quite a lot, and I still can't have a set answer for it. The best I can do is I can probably break it down into some of my top families of fish. You know, so one of those would be the wrasses, and I include the parrotfishes in this family too. They've actually scientifically been included back in the wrasse family. And I like the wrasses and the parrotfish for main reasons in like their mouths, their mouth parts have evolved in all these weird and wonderful ways to extract food off various aspects and things we wouldn't even think about. So a prime example is parrotfish. You know, parrotfish are basically evolved to feed on bacteria or the cyanobacteria that lives in the coral framework. You know, how cool is that? You got a fish that's got teeth fused together, huge bite mark pressure, they've got an extra bone in their hair, extra bone in their skull, and they hit that same spot 3 or 4 times, and they're literally kind of in that area digging down, and they're harvesting the cyanobacteria that live in there. Their mouths even evolved so nothing can be like lost through the gills or out to the front. So that's it. You got another small example of that. So you got the tube whip wrasse, where its mouth structure is kind of involved, where it can actually feed on the coral mucus produced from live coral. And the protein content is probably quite high, so it's probably worthwhile it's developed that niche. Other things that can throw their jaw right out. There's numerous examples with wrasses and parrotfish. My next group in that has to be the butterfly fish. Butterfly fish probably exemplify a lot what coral reef fish is about. I have a painting here. I just grabbed it from outside my office there. It's got a pair of butterfly fish. You can see butterfly fish are cool for a lot of reasons. Colour patterns, of course, but the reasons behind those colour patterns. Bright warning colours. That's why you get those nice yellows and reds and oranges. Blacks and whites, the stripes, they develop fake eye spots, and stripes over their eyes, so like predators can't, work out which is the head, which is the tail. They've got these little tubular mouth-like structures with bristle-like teeth, which they use to feed on live coral polyps. It's a very specialist group of fish. We're quite lucky on the Great Barrier Reef. We have 41 species of them, so that's quite cool in its own right as well. I think Taiwan is the only other place that matches us for diversity on butterfly fish species. And behavioural wise, they're one of those few reef fish species that form pairs. They're not monogamous, but they do form pairs for most of their reproductive history. My next group, I would probably go in that feeding kind of trend. I'll stick with the planktivores, things that feed on tiny little animals that are drifting around in the water column. We call plankton. And there's 3 main groups that I like to represent here. The damsel fishes. And some of the first fish you feed on the reef when you go in there, damsels, numerous species, most of them only up to about 15-20 centimetres in size, most under 10 centimetres. Damsel fish can actually see ultraviolet light, and they probably communicate to one another by flashing little UV light markings all over their head, so that trait alone is quite cool. And the fact that they're pulling like tiny little animals out of the water that we can hardly see with our naked eye, planktivores are pretty cool for that reason alone. A group of fish that I like that never seem to get too much notoriety is if you go to the outer edge of the reef. That's basically where the coral reef meets the open water. And you've got that nice wall. Usually have really large abundances of like fast-growing corals, like plates and things like that. Walls, very impressive place. One of my favourite habitats. On these outer walls coming off, you'll see a fish that's like called a fusilier, and you'll forms large schools. They're difficult to count. I've tried a couple of times through videography is the best. You can get up to about 800 just in one frame. So massive schools of these things if you think three-dimensionally. And they hang various depths in the water column, and they're feeding on that tiny plankton. They're built for speed. They're streamlined to be out in that open water environment where they're more probably prone to predators like mackerels and marlins and things feeding on them. So they're built for speed. They coordinate their movements, their classic fish school movements. And ecologically, these guys probably play a huge part in importing nutrients, oceanic nutrients, into coral reef systems. So, and they probably play a big part too in the resilience side of coral reefs and responding from disturbances. So definitely those. In that planktivore stuff, I've got to go into the surgeon fishes too. Some of the surgeon fish species, they're famous for feeding on a lot of your algae and things, have developed to feed on plankton, gone for elongate bodies. The unicorn surgeon fish develop those kind of long horns on top of their head. You've got to love them. They get them out in the open water. So they're in there. The gropers and the snappers, due to just their diverse feeding strategies. All kind of sizes. You got gropers, small gropers will feed on prawns, into up to your Queensland groper, 3 meters in length, 500 kilos in weight. They basically pluck adult green sea turtles off the surface. So huge range. Snappers are the same. You get a lot of feed on fish, but there's one snapper species I work on, grows up to like nearly 50 centimeters, and primarily feeds on the eggs of other fish. So you might get big schools of surgeon fish spawning. These guys know that behaviour, come right in as the gametes might be released, come by and just suck up all that in one whole issue. So planktivores, definitely gropers and snappers, they're the message. And talking about that open water and fish that is totally associated with coral reefs, I mean, I wasn't going to mention these guys, but I just noticed I have this sitting just on my desk here too. I've got to talk about the billfishes, right? This is the bill of a black marlin, or what we often refer to as the giant black marlin. So the giant black marlin get up to like 450, 500 kilos, possibly more in weight, several meters in length. They have this large structure fixed to the turn of the head. This is it's kind of like ivory, basically, raspy as well, very strong, very sturdy. Now, marlin are some of the fastest fish in the ocean. You think about these guys, right? They out there. They're different to other fish. They regulate their body temperature. They've got a double circulatory system. They've got two different muscle groups. They're quite fast. And they feed on tuna, which are the same. So they go into the water, big school of tuna, come up with big school of yellowfin tuna, whack these things like that, stun the fish, turn around at great speed, come back, eat the tuna head first. So people say marlin may be not associated with the Great Barrier Reef, but you got to think we have a regular spawning aggregation of giant black marlin that occurs just on the edge of the Great Barrier Reef between Cairns and Lizard Island every September to December. And all that spawning aggregation there occurs with these larger fish, and they might go off to other oceanic habitats and all that. Juvenile black marlin grow up in between that interreef mosaic on the continental shelf. So, like I say, it's so hard to pick a favourite fish. Let's move on before I probably get yelled at by citizens.